A very good morning, everyone. I hope you're all staying safe and well, and hopefully starting to enjoy some of the easing of restrictions that we've seen in the past few weeks. My name is Robert Jones, and the Group Development Director for Thomas Carroll Group, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to this morning's webinar entitled Cybersecurity and COVID-19. This morning's webinar will be presented by our very own Emma Francis and Damon Rands of Wolfberry Cybersecurity. And Damon has a pretty impressive CV. He set up Wolfberry back in 2010. It's become an award-winning cybersecurity firm and recently were awarded Best International Cybersecurity Firm UK at the 2020 Cybersecurity Awards. Wolfberry help companies of all shapes and sizes to identify and manage potential security risks. He has over 30 years experience in advising organizations on their cybersecurity. He is also on several advisory boards across education and government, helping to shape resilience and education standards of the nation. Damon this morning will be talking on some key subjects, including the pressing cyber threats to your business today, how COVID has changed the risk of cyber attack, and how you can protect your systems. Emma was appointed as our cyber insurance executive back in 2018, moving across from her original role as an account executive. I think we all know cyber insurance and cyber threats in particular are constantly evolving. So having a dedicated cyber executive allows us to spend time with businesses, understand their risks, and then of course provide a suitable insurance product for them. Now this is a scary fact, but almost half of UK businesses are being affected by a breach. So it's so important that insurance portfolios reflect that risk and the risks that businesses face. Emma is a big believer that prevention is better than cure when it comes to cybersecurity. So has held many seminars educating our clients on how a breach can be prevented. However, I think it's important to say that businesses, and most businesses, will suffer a breach at some time. And this isn't always down to the IT controls that the businesses have in place, but simply down to human error, which is why it's so important to have a comprehensive policy in place. Emma will provide some relevant cyber insurance claim case studies and also discuss risk management through a cyber insurance policy. Both will be available as well at the end of this presentation for an hour or so to take any questions or queries that you may have, and you can do that by sending an email to hello@thomas-carroll.co.uk. So, without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to Emma and Damon.
Hi, my name is Damon Rands, and I'm going to talk to you today about the cyber landscape 2020, sort of the effects of COVID, really, I think. So very quickly, my screen clicked. There you go. Very quickly, so my company is Wolfberry. We're a cybersecurity organization. We help businesses globally understand the threat that they face from cyber and the effects of cybersecurity in all manners of ways. But today we're going to really talk about the threat landscape and how it's changed since COVID, because previously we, as businesses, as all businesses, we were cocooned in our offices. So basically, we knew that every time we would work, even if we had a laptop, we would go back to the office. We would be in that environment that has layers of security, from your firewalls to your endpoint protection to all crazy and clever other bits and pieces that are designed to protect us, including updating your systems to make sure they're secure. And also, you had around that when your laptop was aging, you would get a new one. It would be upgraded, so you would stay current and secure. Now, obviously, that's all been dispersed and may never go back together again, because from the middle of March last year, this year, it's been a long time, we've seen a digital adoption like we've never seen before. We've got businesses now connected to networks and the internet that have never ever considered it and never thought it was needed. So the landscape has been turned completely upside down on its head. And we're seeing a lot of threats that are occurring. And I think Anna's got some great figures later that she's going to go through, which will highlight these. But so what we're really seeing is the biggest problem to most businesses is malware. Malware is in the good old days, we used to have viruses, but now we have malware. And malware is this subset of all different types of things, from keyloggers that will be installed on your device to steal bank details or usernames and passwords, especially passwords. Ransomware, which again, I'm sure we'll talk about later, but we all seen the effects. I mean, we deal as a cybersecurity company, we deal with the effects of ransomware on a daily basis. But all these malware, they all exist to exploit weaknesses on your network. And that's where you've got to sort of understand the vulnerabilities that exist on your system. So it's really, really important. And it gives you a level of assurance, which is something we'll talk about as we go through this. But, you know, malware in general looks to exploit different aspects, you know, whether it's ransomware, keyloggers, anything. It looks to identify, take advantage of system misconfigurations, you know, incorrect permissions, people logging on to do their daily work basis as an administrator is a real problem. Vulnerable software from operating systems, from using things like Windows 7 still, you know, Windows 7 is end of life as far as Microsoft are concerned. There are no patches or security updates available mainstream for that. You can apply to Microsoft to get extended support, but it is expensive and it will only last for the next year and a half. But yeah, understanding, it's all of these things are always about understanding the threats that you face. User error, possibly one of the most common and topical today. You know, we've got with the incident that's happened exactly this morning with Twitter, which is quite interesting. It's a combination of user error and malicious activity. Apparently the hackers have announced that they were able to bribe an employee to give them access to the Twitter accounts that they wanted. So these things happen on a daily basis. And I will say as well, we do see all the Hollywood hacks. So all the things that hit the press and hit the news, but lots of the real stories, lots of the real problems happen way below that don't get reported on the news. And as I said, as a company, we deal with the effects of that on a weekly basis. Default passwords, which is a great thing, you know. How many people, when they buy a device, whether it's a television, whether it's a router, a firewall, a printer, Wi-Fi, how many people change the default password? It's a really important problem that cyber criminals look to take hold of. And again, stolen credentials. Lots of people are unaware that your credentials could be floating around on the internet, in the dark web and the deep web. And just for clarity as well, I thought it'd be good to explain what the dark web is and the deep web, but that will come up later. So malware looks to attack and affect those areas, right? That's how it's able to propagate around networks and cause the havoc that it does. But we're going to talk about the main delivery mechanisms for this. Now, there are three. There's drive-by downloads, remote desktop protocols, and phishing emails. Now, I'm saying it's going to talk about three. There are a whole bunch more, but these, especially phishing emails, are the three most prominent at the moment. And with COVID, remote desktop has become really, really prevalent as well. So phishing emails. Now, phishing emails have been around for a long, long time. Even before we had the internet, when we used to have letters in the post asking to help us take money out of a bank account that's been frozen in a foreign country, and for a small fee, they will give you £10,000. These things have been going around for a long, long time. The reason they go around is because they work. And it's as simple as that. They worked when they were letters in badly broken English. They work now as sophisticated email attacks. Now, we do a lot of phishing simulations for businesses, and we cover all different types of topics, because you've got to realize cyber criminals use phishing emails to invoke action, to create fear, and they play on those. And the fear can be something really simple like Amazon emails. You know, especially in December, those 2 weeks before Christmas, Amazon are businesses are businesses are affected by Amazon emails. No, sorry, everybody, personal emails. You'll get, you know, your Amazon delivery is running late. Click here. There's a problem with your DHL order. We see such a success rate with that. We've collated all the data. We run phishing simulations, as I said, for our clients, and we've collated the data, and we'll see there are 3 stages to a phishing email. 1, the email being sent. 2, the email being opened. And then 3, the email being clicked. Because the goal of the cyber criminal is to get that end user to click on the link, not just open the email, but click on the link. That link could steal credentials, could install a piece of malware on your system, and it can do a whole bunch of things. That malware then can morph into a keylogger, into ransomware, into lots of different bits and pieces, all causing a threat. And as with Amazon, we see a success rate with our Amazon emails of 15%. So over every email we send, 15% of those users will click on them. So that's quite a high number. Then in January, you'll see HMRC. That's quite a good one. You will have a tax return. Although it's a lot less success rate for us when we run those, we still see a click. We never fail to have someone click on the email, which is a real worry, right? So HMRC, we'll see about a 2% click. But then as soon as we send phishing emails around COVID, then it just spikes. You know, the last exercise we ran, we had a 20% click rate where people clicked on the emails. And that was some 300 people, I believe. So it's a huge numbers, and it's only going to get worse as soon as track and trace comes into place now. The fear that is around that, the concern that it will cause. If somebody gets an email and says, you've been identified in the government's track and trace program, click on here to see information about what you need to do next, I can guarantee you so many people will click on it. So it's going to be a public information exercise. But I always say that, and a great example is the HMRC. HMRC say that they will never explain or discuss your tax affairs over email. It doesn't stop people clicking on those links. So the success of emails, phishing emails now, has meant that the threat posed has changed. The landscape has changed. As an organization, you always have to assume that the cyber criminals have got past your first barrier of defense, so your firewalls and everything else, because they are literally sitting on your network with a successful phishing email. If they want to target you and make it really accurate, a spear phishing email, you know, so really laser focused on your organization, then they will get through. You have to just appreciate that and accept it. And then we have to move on and other ways of protecting your systems. So phishing emails are a really, really scary and really potent attack mechanism. That's why they're so popular with cyber criminals. They look to play on the lists, you know, that we talked about earlier. They look to play on misconfiguration, malicious activity, vulnerable software, and user errors. You know, user error, people clicking on emails, clicking on links. Because at the end of the day, we could all defeat phishing emails tomorrow. Stop clicking on links. If nobody clicked on the links, phishing emails have become redundant. But unfortunately, we cannot, with the best will of the world, train people to not click on that email. Because especially when the emails are targeted and made to look so realistic. The next major avenue is remote desktop. Again, because of the pandemic, it's become a real problem that organizations now are working remotely, and many may never go back again. As a company, we have changed the way we're structured now to accommodate people working from home and just different ways of working, you know, different hours. And I think talking to most businesses, they will never go back, or it will take a very long time for them to go back to the way that it used to be. So into that comes remote desktop, because people still have to have access to their data and have access to the systems that they work on when they're in the office and work from home and so on. So we're seeing remote desktop deployed rapidly and globally, but not always securely. So you'll see, you know, there's so many issues. Lots of organizations pre-pandemic were running vulnerable operating systems like Windows 2008, and instead of appreciate that there was no timescale to update from 2008 to a more secure operating system, a later, more modern operating system, they've instead put that directly on the internet through remote desktop, which has exposed their networks. It's a huge problem that needs remediation. So organizations have to be aware of the software, the versions they're running, and then they have to put appropriate controls in to protect them. So we could sit here this afternoon and we could scan the global internet to look for these remote desktop connections, and they will appear in Google if we needed, and we could play with people's networks. It's a real problem. It's quite often nothing personal. It's not a targeted attack, but people will sit there with better to do, sifting through the internet. They may come across your organization's remote desktop protocol and decide to have a play and look for vulnerabilities. And then if they can expose your network and log in, then you've got things to worry about. So the third and quite popular form is drive-by downloads. Now, this has been around a long, long time and has affected many websites. So from the BBC to the New York Times to Jamie Oliver's website. And basically, it takes innocent websites, but especially say with Jamie Oliver's website or the New York Times, you'll see adverts on those web pages. Those adverts have been infected with malware. So what they'll do as you're browsing the website, it completely innocently, you could be looking on Jamie Oliver's website to see what you're going to cook for the evening. And without you realizing, that website, the adverts in that website are scanning your computer looking for vulnerable software. If they can find that you're using a vulnerable version of Google Chrome or Internet Explorer or Firefox or Windows 7, it will be able to exploit that in the background and install a little piece of software that again could become ransomware, could become a keylogger and various other things. It's a real popular form of attack again, and the only way to really defend it is to make sure you're using the latest version of software, whether that's the browser, the operating system. And a great defense as well is not to be logged in as an administrator. So setting your permissions correctly is a really important point as well. So that's the best way to protect against those as well. So what protection is available? So I'm sure many people, I'm going to explain very quickly about Cyber Essentials and the levels of assurance. What we try to do at Wolfberry is set assurance levels. Now I will say our assurance levels go from 0, no assurance, all the way up to 90. You can never have 100% assurance, basically because there's that 10%, which is people. We've seen people and we've heard of examples. An IT manager at a company, to get revenge, sold their server on eBay. We can never protect you against that. You know, that happens. So you'll never get 100% assurance, but you know, we can set levels as we go. So we got level 1, level 2, and level 3, which we'll discuss very quickly. So level 1 is the one we're going to spend the most time on, which is Cyber Essentials Plus. Now, those who don't know, Cyber Essentials is a government standard. It was introduced, I think, a long time ago now, about 2014. Think of it as an MOT for your car, for your cybersecurity system. It covers a number of areas. But before I go into that, there are 2 levels. There are Cyber Essentials Standard and Cyber Essentials Plus. Now, Cyber Essentials Standard is required for you to get Cyber Essentials Plus, but you can do Cyber Essentials Standard on its own. Now, we see a large number of organizations doing that and then feeling that they get some level of assurance from that. Now, Cyber Essentials Standard is a self-assessment questionnaire. It's just a questionnaire that has no verification. So an organization could claim to have the cybersecurity equivalent to NASA in their office, but there is no third-party verification against that. So as a result, you could receive your certificate and think you're really secure, but not have answered your questions correctly. So really, with Cyber Essentials Standard, you really get no level of assurance at all, because I've never seen a piece of paper be able to stop a virus attack or a ransomware attack. So it's really important for people to understand it's the first toe on the road to becoming more secure and nothing more. The best thing about Cyber Essentials Standard is it allows you to do Cyber Essentials Plus. Now, Cyber Essentials Plus covers off five different controls within your organization. Secure configuration. So it involves third-party verification. You complete your Cyber Essentials Standard application, then an engineer or a device will test your systems for you to make sure that what you've attested to in your Cyber Essentials Standard application is relevant and is correct. So it'll do things like secure configuration, check for default passwords, all the things that we discussed at the beginning of this presentation. Boundary firewalls to make sure your firewall is secure and there's no ease of access. Again, the remote desktop protocol would come into that. That's what we discussed earlier. Access control, which is permissions, right? Make sure that people aren't logging onto the systems as administrator. That helps with protecting against drive-by downloads. Patch management, to make sure that you've got all the latest operating system patches installed and you're in the best place to be secure. And malware protection. It tests to see if your antivirus actually works, which is a great, a great advantage. And I will say at this point as well, antivirus is vital. The internet is full of colds floating around the world globally, and if you don't have antivirus installed on your computer, you will catch a cold and it will cause you problems. But it is not a cybersecurity product, and it is not a last line of defense. It is just an essential piece of software that sits on your computer system these days. And for those with Windows 10, Windows 10 comes with Defender and antivirus built into it. It's a great product, and then unless you need overall management of all your devices, it is an adequate product. So it's worth just using that quite often. One thing I would say, and I'm sure you'll wonder why we only say that Cyber Essentials Plus, for doing all of that, only gives you 30% assurance. Well, because the tests are only completed against a sample size. Using the MOT reference again, it would be like having an MOT on your car and then only picking one wheel to test and assuming that the brakes and the tires on every other wheel are fine. One wheel and one light, and you're okay. So you could never be certain and never be guaranteed that you're protected. It is great. It's a whole foot on that road, but it's something that is a start, and it's a world away from Cyber Essentials Standard and much more secure. So there are a couple of levels after that Wolfberry provides services for now, but these services are available under other organizations as well. But I'll talk to you about what we can do, but obviously, as I said, there are services that other businesses can provide you as well. So we've developed a product called Viper. Viper will do everything that level 1 would do, as we discussed in Cyber Essentials Plus, but it does it for the whole organization, and it does it on a monthly level, and you get lots of lovely reports highlighting the problems. It's fantastic for organizations that have external IT support, because it helps you manage your external IT support organization as well. And we work with a lot of IT companies who appreciate the third-party verification for this as well, because a lot of the times, and here's a shout out for IT, I don't do this very often, right? IT's job is to keep you up and running, and they will do that all the time. If they turn to you and said every time there was a patch and an update, we're going to have to shut your systems down for a couple of hours because we need to securely upgrade. You may be sympathetic most of the time, but I'm telling you, I've seen good IT companies lose contracts because they were doing the job properly. Their job is focused on keeping the availability of your system up and running. So they don't always get the security part right. That's where we can assist. We manage and we watch that, and other cybersecurity companies as well, I should say. There is that level of support that we can provide that helps you with that. So this will monitor and track, configuration changes over time, because you'll see different changes in your systems, in your reports. And again, as I said, it helps manage your IT support as well. So the most support you can get, I should say, we have introduced as well as part of our Viper subscription is phishing simulations and dark web credential searches. As I've mentioned earlier, we have to assume that cyber criminals are on your network purely because of the phishing simulations that we do. We see that we always get someone click through. So at that point, it may not be ransomware, it may just be a malignant thing, something sitting on your network that's dormant and it's not doing anything at all. But it could be something else. So phishing simulations are worth their weight in gold. Dark web credential searches are worth talking about separately for a second. So we, for our clients, we provide dark web searches as part of our services. Now, for those who don't know, I'm going to explain very quickly what the dark web is and the deep web, because they're two different things and people interchange them, meaning two different things. So the deep web is parts of the internet that Google doesn't index. And a great example of that is university access, a university data. They quite often hold it on there, but you can't find it. You can't find the research information unless they publish it. Another great example that people know is Amazon and Netflix. So Amazon and Netflix, their data exists on the internet, right? Because you use the internet to access it, but it's not indexed or searched by Google. It's in the deep web, in the deep recesses of the internet, away from the Google pages and Yahoo and all the other sorts. So that's the deep web. Information does exist in there from nefarious areas and things like that, but mainly it exists on the dark web. Now, the dark web is a separate underlayer of the internet with its own servers and exists away. You're unable to search it using Chrome. You have to have specialist software that allows you to access the internet. And basically in there, it's a home for all sorts of things, mostly unpleasant, and I wouldn't advise most people to go on it. But believe it or not, they have equivalents to Amazon. They have all these different little places where you can buy all manner of things, which we don't need to discuss, but one of them will be credentials. So if you are a victim in a phishing attack and you lose your credentials in that process by either giving them or using the cyber criminals use a keylogger, that information can and will end up on the dark web for sale in these shops. So using some quite clever software, we're able to monitor that for our clients and identify information. So it's a really key service these days, and it is becoming more and more important as we move on to assuming we have a state of mind of that we have been compromised. There's been a stat that the FBI and UK government for years have used, in that they say that 70% of all companies have been hacked, and the other 30% don't realize that they have. And that is becoming more and more true as we travel along. So that's the phishing simulations and the dark web credential searches. And the final one is, this is the heavier hitter. So assuming that an organization has been breached, so we provide a service. Again, this is general terms that lots of companies, and feel free to Google this information, is that threat detection. Threat detection is it's a service that is now becoming available to the mainstream. Previously, it was a service that was extremely expensive and just cost inhibitive, mainly because it involves a person sitting in front of a screen watching the traffic on your network to make sure nothing bad is happening. So it does all the stuff that was on level 1 and level 2. So it gives you all those levels of assurance. But as I said, it also involves someone sitting there viewing your systems to make sure nothing is going wrong, making sure that Tom in HR isn't uploading all your data to Dropbox, which we see ridiculously all the time, and other things like that. Seeing ransomware explode on your network and analyzing traffic. We ran an exercise for a client recently. When we put one of these boxes in, it sat on the network, and immediately we could see attack attempts coming from Russia and from China to hitting their remote desktop access. We discovered when we followed that they actually had been breached on several occasions using that technology. So we were able to track down, and then they were fortunate they got away with it previously, but we were able to help them then close those holes down by advising them on the steps. So this is the most level of assurance you can get, really, with constant monitoring of your systems to make sure that everything is staying absolutely secure. And again, that keeps you within regulatory compliance, yeah, with GDPR and all the other things we have these days, PCI DSS and so on. So as a quick overview of assurance, so there we go. There's Cyber Essentials Standard. As I said, it gives you no protection against anything, really, bless it. But it is so important because, as I said, it's that first toe onto the road of becoming more secure. Then we have the Cyber Essentials Plus, the Viper subscriptions that we provide, and then all the way up to threat detection, which is really worthwhile. So that is me. I will now hand you over to Emma, or she will take control, and I will sit back.
Oh, thanks, Damon. Good to hear from you as always. Yeah, cybersecurity is key, and I'll talk about insurance, but you know, prevention is better than obviously relying on the insurance policy once the event's already happened. So I'll just get my presentation. So here we go. Yeah, so as mentioned, cybersecurity is key. However, unfortunately, due to human error, you will suffer a breach at some point, and it is highly likely that you're going to suffer a breach. 90% of all the breaches that insurers are going to see will have an aspect of human error involved in them. So it's really important, you know, you've got all those things in place that Damon mentioned, but that you've also got the insurance policy in place when it does happen to you. And you know, cyber and data breaches are prevalent in both SMEs and large corporations. So I'm just going to talk about some cyber claims that we're seeing and the insurance that's available to help you protect against them. So cyber insurance policies provide cover in respect of accidental and malicious data breaches and the costs involved with a hack. So that could be business interruption, but also like data restoration costs and things like that, which can be very costly. So business has changed now, and most businesses rely on their IT. So that could be whether you use it for your back office support in your supply chain, but you know, it could be that you use it for your sales. It could be your online sales, the way the majority of your income comes from. So however you use technology, it will be embedded in your organisation. Recently, businesses have changed the way that they work as well. So you've had the coronavirus pandemic, and a lot of businesses have changed how they work. So as Damon mentioned, businesses are working from home, but also a lot of businesses have moved to online sales. And unfortunately, we have seen a spike in like the phishing attacks that Damon mentioned. I think there's reports of they've increased by about 600% whilst the pandemic's been going on. So it's really important that your employees are aware of the attacks that are out there. And despite the costs of the attacks are also increasing, and this is down to various reasons, and it can be down to the attacks becoming more targeted, and also you've got regulation as well. So you've got GDPR, means you've got the mandatory notification and things like that, which all add to the costs of a breach. Also, you know, you've got the fines and everything else that now comes along with a data breach. And the average cost of a breach is now increased to 46,000, and that is just the average cost. That's, you know, not worst case scenario, and that's, you know, if a breach is managed effectively. So you know, if you don't manage a breach effectively and you've had a severe breach, the costs can actually be a lot higher than that again. yes, the increase of the cost is down to regulation, and another reason may be that in the past, if you've had a phishing attack, you've secured your systems and you can carry on trading. Now, because of the regulation, you will look to see if a hacker accessed any information whilst in your system, and you've lost some personal identifiable information. And then you've got a fine of up to 4% of your annual turnover, capped at 20 million euros. So this I find interesting. It's a report published by an insurer, Hiscox, and it details the most common types of breaches. So not surprising, the most common breaches there are, virus, email compromise, and ransomware. And ransomware gets talked about a lot, and it's because it's really costly and it's lucrative business for hackers. It can increase the cost of a malware by 200% if there's a ransomware involved. So that's why it does get talked about a lot. And it really does drive home the importance then of good detection and backups, and there's stuff obviously that Damon can help with and has mentioned. The thing I did find quite surprising on the report is the amount of claims from lost equipment. Now, Damon may disagree with me on this, but I was quite surprised by the amount of claims due to lost equipment. But I know Damon did do some work on this and called it the lonely laptop. So I've got some of Damon's pictures here. I'll put them on, Damon. But this is where data breaches are coming from. So I don't know if you want to add anything to this, Damon, where they were taken or what was going on here.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time in Starbucks. What can I say? And other coffee shops are available. But no, we see it all the time. People are absolutely blasé with their technology. They'll just get up and pop outside for a cigarette or pop up to the loo and they'll just leave the machines. I mean, the record I've seen is in the Village Hotel where somebody left their laptop, their phone and their wallet and disappeared for just over an hour. I must say as well, I do like to time it. But yeah, we always recommend if anybody does see a laptop like that, they should take a photograph of it and we'll put it on our Twitter feed. Because it's absolutely crazy. It just leaves the machines absolutely exposed. And if you think, probably the worst thing that could be done with it is not the laptop being stolen, because then there are processes in place for that. It's what someone could do. They could install a little USB. There's something called a bit of homework for everyone. There's something called a little rubber ducky that you could plug in that looks like a USB stick. It pretends to be a keyboard and can install malware on a device, bypassing the antivirus and everything else that goes with it. So yeah, it can be scary stuff, and those stats don't surprise me yet.
No, I didn't think they would, but yeah, so yeah, lost laptops and things like that, lost equipment, the data that's along with them accounted still for a lot of the data breach that insurers are seeing. So not surprisingly, most of the breaches that we see are down to human error, over 90%. Employee awareness is absolutely key to protecting your organisation, and Tom's Carroll advocate this. So we've got many articles on our website around employee awareness and things that you can do to protect your organisation around this. So identifying phishing emails might be a starter, antivirus security, not leaving them in Starbucks, and just basic stuff like that really. But it's important to convey that to your employees. So before I go into the detail on how cyber insurance covers you for accidental and malicious data breaches, cyber events, I'm just going to give some examples that are relevant to most businesses, and it just sort of brings home the costs involved with the breach. So most of us have heard of the larger breaches. So you've got TalkTalk in 2015, who had a data breach where personal data was stolen, half the value of the profits that year. They lost over 100,000 customers, which goes to show damage to reputation can have on business. It cost them 60 million to put things right, and then on top of that, they had the ITO fines and drops in share value. So that's how it affects large businesses. Another one, Mazik, who suffered malware in their systems, rendered their systems completely unusable, and the estimated cost of that was mega money. It was between $250 to $300 million. So
yeah, they had to replace 45,000 PCs.
Oh my God, yeah. So yeah, it's a it's a lot of it can be very, very costly. Let's just say. So yeah, so that's how the big companies are affected. But it's not just the large businesses that are affected and suffer from a breach. Small businesses do, and they have got lower IT budgets, and it can leave them a bit more more vulnerable to an attack. So here are a couple of examples. So a care home had a laptop stolen, and the laptop was a post-it note. Had the password for the laptop on it, so not clever. That data breach was between 150 and 175,000 pounds because it was a breach of confidential information. Now we look traditionally to insure our laptops for theft, which you can replace for a couple of £100 in a lot of cases. But are we looking at insuring our data as we should be? So that's just one example there. And I've got another example of a data breach, which, with the result of reputational damage, cost a business over 700,000. So obviously they had the cyber insurance. But what happened here was insurer dealt with a claim. A company had multiple attacks on their website. So the breach response team came in with the insurance and, secured the system quite quickly. But what they found, that credit card details were taken, they were accessed and exfiltrated from the system. So at this point, you've got legal costs, IT costs, and notification costs, all amounting to about 230,000, which was all covered. But following that notification to the individuals affected by the breach, they had a resulting business interruption and a loss of profits due to that damaged reputation. And that was another £475,646 drop from what they had in previous years, just due to the damage of reputation. So it's really important that businesses consider that reputational damage that they can suffer due to a breach. And it's also important to speak about the insurance cover and the protection that you want, because all the policies are different and you need to make sure that they're adequate for you. So one final example, the phishing email. So, Damon mentioned they're oh so common, and we've probably all seen them. A business had a phishing email come in, and a lady in the business clicked on the phishing email. It said on there that there was a financial statement attached, and they clicked on it. Now, there was grammatical errors riddled in that email. Now, if she'd had the appropriate staff awareness training, she may not have even clicked on that email, on that attachment. However, she did, and some malware was downloaded into the system. It was a ransomware was into the system. So again, the insurers responded to the ransomware, and they dealt with that quite quickly, and they started to decrypt the files. However, things aren't always straightforward when it comes to things like ransomware. They rarely are, and a database was actually lost which contained like the stock levels, delivery information, and things like that. The database had to be rebuilt, and that cost over £20,000. And then on top of that, there was nearly £22,000 in lost sales for that period. And even though they were still up, running and trading, it was just down to the disruption and not completing the sale. So in some examples, deliveries weren't made because they lost delivery information. Deliveries were made twice. They just didn't know what stock was available, and customers went elsewhere. So claims can be costly, and breaches can be costly. So we've mentioned the implications of a cyber breach. However, it's important to know that you can also cover your business for funds transfer fraud and cybercrime, and it is prevalent, and it's something I urge all organisations to consider, because we see them very often, and even businesses with really stringent verification processes have fallen for them, because the phishing attacks that we see are becoming really targeted. And also that they're a lot more common and happening often. So sometimes businesses are falling for them, and as I said, it can be the ones with really good processes in place as well. So it's really important that staff are aware of the types of phishing emails you can fall foul to. So it could be email interceptions when you log onto public Wi-Fi, or someone clicking on one of those emails and allowing a hacker access to your system. and you know, they can start intercepting emails and things like that and monitoring what you're doing, which makes the attacks, when they come in, quite targeted. So I've highlighted the potential costs for a breach, and they can go from legal costs, IT costs, reputational damage. So I just go quickly through how a cyber policy can help you. So for me, central to the insurance policy is the 24-hour helpline. So if you do suffer a breach, you can actually phone the insurer and they can assist you with that. So it can be, you know, you've suffered a breach, you phone the insurance helpline, and they've got some experts on hand to help you straight away. We've had instances where we've had breaches on a Friday at 5 o'clock. The staff can walk in on Monday and be none aware that you know, there was a breach over the weekend. The insurers have dealt with it. They dealt with it quickly, and a lot of the time they can deal with it before the data breach and notification scenario works. It's really vital that you get that quick response before an incident can become really costly. So don't leave it. Get that assistance straight away, even if you suspect that you've done something that you shouldn't have. So over and above the initial response, the other things you need to think about are legal advice and defence costs. So you may actually get people suing you if you've breached their information and things like that. So all that is covered on an insurance policy. IT forensics costs are covered. So engaging in, you know, experts to help you, those costs are covered, and the insurance can help you manage it as well. And a lot of the time they will work alongside your IT provider and assist them in getting you back up and running as quickly as possible, and making sure, you know, checking what was breached and if there's any notifications that need to be considered. So other things that are covered on the insurance policy, the notification costs, so notifying individuals affected by a breach. Business interruption costs, so you're probably used to buying business interruption cover in respect of your office policies and your commercial combined insurance policies. They don't cover cyber events. So if you want business interruption cover from a cyber event, it needs to be covered on a cyber policy. The costs of the data restoration are covered. Cyber extortion, we've mentioned ransomware. That is actually covered on the insurance policy as well. So if you do suffer a ransom, the insurer will pay it. So where it's they'd rather not pay it. However, if it's appropriate, then the insurer will actually cover that for you as well. And importantly, the PR advice is covered on the policy. So you've mentioned reputational damage, and it's something that's often overlooked when we talk about cyber and data breaches and things like that. So PR advice is covered on the policy, and this is just how you communicate a data breach or a cyber breach, not to, you know, try and lose your biggest customer, because it can have a massive impact on your bottom line, or how you communicate it with all those customers that were breached, just trying to mitigate the effects of a breach, really. So it's all really important, and it all needs to be covered on an insurance policy. So just conscious that I've talked for a while now, I look to wrap things up, but I just want to leave you with this slide. So this slide is something that businesses should be considering and thinking about if they hold data or they rely on IT for any parts of their business, whether it be, you know, back office or a major sales function. So you've got GDPR to think about and the implications there. Reputation and brands. You suffer a breach, you know, the reputational damage and how you manage that. Business interruption and continuity planning. How long will you be down, your backups and things like that, and getting you back up and running as quickly as possible. The legal and regulatory risk, so damages from third parties. We've mentioned cybercrime and the funds transfer fraud, and why it's important to look to get that cover extended on your cyber policy to cover that. The reinstatement of IT, and if you use outsourced providers, have you done your due diligence on them? Because what they do will affect your reputation at the end of the day. If they're acting on your behalf, it's important that you've done due diligence on them, and you know they are up to the job, because what they do, as with your employees, can have a massive effect on your business. So it's important to look at that as well. The costs of cyber insurance policies for SMEs can start now at just a couple of £100 for a good policy. So businesses no longer have to worry about, affording a cyber policy as much, and is it a risk that you can afford not to take. So if you're talking about a couple of £100 for all that cover and protection and peace of mind, it's probably something that businesses should definitely be considering. So it just leaves me to say thanks for listening, and if you have any questions, whether it be on insurance or cybersecurity, feel free to contact myself or Damon, and we'll be happy to help you. We'll also put a copy of the webinar on our website for your information as well. Okay, thank you. Is there anything you want to add, Damon?
No, thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Damon. A very interesting and I think thought-provoking presentation from them both there. And thanks ever so much to you both for sharing your knowledge and experience on this particular subject with us all this morning. And I think it's pretty obvious that this is a very serious threat to most businesses, not just here in Wales, in the UK, but I think the businesses globally. So it's important that we understand that, and hopefully both have given you some food for thought this morning. I hope you have taken something away from this morning's webinar. If you do have any questions, just a reminder that both Damon and Emma will be available at the end of this webinar to take any questions that you may have, and you can do that, as I said earlier, by sending your emails to hello@thomas-carroll.co.uk. That's hello@Thomas, Thomas-Carroll, CARROLL.co.uk. Thanks ever so much for joining us. As I said, I hope you have taken something away from this morning's webinar. Please keep your eye out as well for future webinars that we will be running over the course of the next few weeks, next few months. And you can do that by checking social media, checking your emails, and you can also view this morning's webinar and others that we've done in the past weeks, past months, by visiting our website, which is www.thomas-carroll.co.uk. So thanks again for joining us. Hopefully you can join us for future webinars. But in the meantime, have a great day and have a great weekend.